I'm not making any promises here, but we'll go live. What the hell? Oh, hello YouTube. We are live for Orange You Glad It's Not the Closer, number 17. And I thought we'd take a little time on this day to talk about D-Day. And I was really hoping to get a few more people in here, get a few more stories or people who would didn't necessarily have to be somebody that was in your family, but something you found maybe online, somebody you heard about that you wanted to bring a little attention to. But we've got a smaller panel, and if there's others out there, like Gunpowder Beauty has a link, she can hop in. I'm sure Snob is out there someplace. Sarge is working. I talked to him a little earlier, and he wanted to know what kind of computer I was using for my videos and everything, and he didn't believe me when I told him Commodore 64, so he had to call me about it. But I thought we'd cover D-Day a little bit today, and then whatever we get into. So we'll go through the panel here and say hello to everybody. And we'll start up there in the mitten with Mr. Squiblift. How are you?
Muted. That's how I am. I never get called first. I wasn't ready for that. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for the invite, Obnoxious, and hoping for a good show.
Yeah, you can hope.
Well, I mean, hope and change. How's that working out?
Yeah. And keep your hope, and I'll take the change. Wasn't that was the or keep the change? And I don't know.
Really, it should have been, I'm going to take your change, and there's no hope.
Yeah, that was pretty much it too. But but we didn't go all apoplectic and screaming that the world was ending and that the guy in there was evil. But that's entirely different subject. So thanks for coming in, Squiblift. And I know you've got a story, so we'll get to you, and we'll go through and finish up our howdies and say hello to the man from Maryland living in there in that great freedom-loving state that it is. How are you?
Basking in the wonderfulness of the free state. No, I'm doing really good, man. I appreciate you having me, and I appreciate the topic for tonight, too.
Not a problem. I figured it was the least we can do, and I'm going to make a disclaimer here that I do not have a D-Day story, but I do have a story of a family member, and I think it's pretty significant as well. So we'll cover that when we get there. Also, from the mitten, we got Gunpowder Beauty joining us. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Thank you for the invite. I am not sure how long my internet will hold up, but I wanted to come in and at least try to show some support.
Well, thank you for showing up. Take anybody we can get, even you.
Aw, thanks, honey. Love you too.
And from the great state of Kansas, he may be down a leg, but he's still got all his gizzards. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thanks for the invite.
Not a problem. Through see who we got out there. Oh, we've got Snob's wife is out there. Where's your old man? Is he working? What's going on? We got Seven Wonders. How you doing, Seven, out there? Looks like he's working with his kitties right now. We got Guitar Man Pete. Some orange men are bad. Some orange men are good. Got Weston Probst out there. Gunpowder pulling double duty. Kingpin getting that gun channels link out there. Andrew Faulkner is out there. So I'm guessing we have a lot of people over to watch. I think Hank is still live. Is anybody else quirking me? Who else is quirking me? But I thought we'd run through, and I'm going to screen share here. And take a look at, let's start out with the photos of D-Day. We got this one coming here, and I've seen this one quite a bit come up. I would imagine we'll all have seen quite a few of these. Hey, Patriot, how are you doing? We've got guys leaving the boat, heading into the jaws of death, as it says up there. What do you guys think of this? I can't even imagine what it must have been like to be on those boats. And never mind if you're the first boat going in there. What if you're the last boat going in there?
Well, there's, especially in World War II, there's people that were there for many different reasons. There were some guys that were, couldn't wait to sign up because they wanted to go and fight and defend liberty and smash tyranny. Then there was people that had to go. But no matter what, when you're sitting in that boat with that door shut, no matter why you're there, and maybe it's just because I'm a civilian, but the terror that has got to be going through your body at the time, because you got to also think this is a still picture. When you watch some of the videos, right now you're hearing ping, 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 all kinds of machine gun fire and gunfire hitting that boat. Then all the bombs that are going off all around. I mean, that's got to be one of the most, if not the most terrifying thing to have to deal with. And thank God that those men in that water right there were in that water.
Yep. I mean, and like I said, it's going in there is the first boat is one thing, but going in there, it was one of the later boats when you've seen everything and you still have to get off that boat. I can't even imagine, and they had, I saw one interview today, and the guy was talking about he wasn't brave, he just pretended to be brave. And it's, no, you were brave. Being courage is being scared and still going and still doing it. And I can't imagine what it was like being on any of those boats, whether it was the first one or a later one, but every one of those men that went, whether they came back or especially the ones that did not, deserve our thanks. And it's just it's something that's unfathomable now, that this is how we would start an assault. And yeah. I'm sure we've all seen, Saving Private Ryan, and that was one of the other things up here. If you see 5 great movies inspired by D-Day, and just that first half an hour of Saving Private Ryan, you can't watch that and not feel the gravity of the situation of what those men went through.
Yeah, getting off the boat is just the beginning.
Yeah.
It's not like oh, we're in the water, we're in good shape now.
Yeah. Yeah. We're in the water, so now we've got to, if we got off the boat to begin with, that's a win. If we get out of the water, that's a win. If we get 10 feet onto the beach, that's a win. And that's all you got is you're just trying to make it to the next tiny win that you're going to get.
Well, and one thing that may be overlooked, it may not be, and maybe it's just my thinking, but the Normandy invasion was the best time and the best place to do it.
Yeah.
And they had the Germans on their back feet. They weren't ready for it. There was all kinds of chaos going on. Imagine how million times worse it would have been if the full German army was sitting there waiting.
Yeah, they'd spent what, like 2 months previous to this trying to convince them they were coming in someplace else.
Hitler was sleeping.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I learned that today, that Hitler was sleeping when they did this. And not like that really would have made too much of a difference. I mean, he's in Germany.
They didn't want to wake him up. They didn't want to disturb him.
He had the final call on the troop movement for something like that. So none of the generals were willing to make that call that we've got to go pull everybody over here now because of what Hitler might do about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. He micromanaged his military, and if he had just let his generals run it, he might have had a chance. And when he finally got involved, he wanted to move the armor and everything into the Pas de Calais, that area that you had talked about. That's the shortest distance between England and France crossing English Channel, because he said it's a diversion attack. They're going to come in at the Pas de Calais, and it's like, read the reports, dude. If this is a diversion attack, the main force would be bigger than this. There aren't that many Americans, but he made a lot of mistakes and did a lot of micromanaging, and it cost him.
Nancy Midnight says his grandpa couldn't watch Saving Private Ryan. He was at Guadalcanal and went through an amphibious landing, like Normandy, smaller, but same thing. Yeah, same thing here. Midnight is I can't imagine, and I didn't serve, and I will say I have the utmost respect for the people who do. As I get older, I have more respect for the people that have served than I did when I was of that age. And it's one of the things as I get older, I wish I had. But if I had, I wouldn't be married to the same woman that I've been married to for 27 years. I wouldn't have, I would have a different life. And I kind of like my life, but it's the one thing that I do regret in my life is that I didn't serve. But I still
think about it too. We're all sitting here on our cell phones or, on our couches or dining room tables or beds or wherever, watching a TV show on the internet and, chatting all across the country and in some cases across the world. It's, nice houses and lights and all these other kinds of wonderful things that we enjoy. If they didn't go, if all those men just there in the water were like, nah, I'm not going. I'm not doing this. If what they were fighting for wasn't so worth it, there's no way that we'd be doing what we're doing right now. The world would be a rotten, horrible place if that guy right there holding that gun wasn't holding that gun at that very moment in time in history. That man right there made all of this possible.
It's not just for us. I used to work for a French company.
This picture, I don't know if you can see it, Squib, because you're probably on your phone. But this is a picture of Canadians. The second picture in this group is Canadians landing on Corsellis Beach. And so, it wasn't just Americans. This was...
Well, it wasn't just Americans, but we comprise most of it. I mean, a majority of it, not just manpower, but ships and everything. But I meant the French that were there waiting for the Americans to...
hell yeah, the resistance.
Right. And I used to work for a French automotive company, and those guys are a bunch of socialist dirtbags. and one of them was just, I don't know. They love to run their mouth, badmouth America. Everybody thinks, oh, the French, they're so this, that, and the other. I mean, they gave us the Statue of Liberty and stuff. And well, not the modern French. Well, one of them was just badmouthing America, and I let him have it. I let him have it right there, and everybody could hear it. And I said, if my great uncle hadn't stormed the beaches in Normandy, you wouldn't be here today, able to tell me how bad my country is. A few hours later, one of the French guys that I really did like, he came up to me and goes, hey, I don't want you to think we're all like this. I appreciate what your great uncle did. And it's like, wow, I never thought I would hear that from, one of them, because of how many of them had such a bad attitude about America. And if you think the left-wing liberal media is bad, imagine if that was your neighbor, the person you worked with, the person you're driving past every day. It just, that seems to be the norm over there. But it was kind of nice to have somebody from over there, with the accent and everything, say thank you. Even though it was from my great uncle. He's telling it to me because my great uncle's not right there for him to say it to. But it was good to know that somebody over there still remembered that Americans came to their aid.
I heard a lot of stories like that today, that there are people, there's shitbags in every country, in every religion, in every whatever you want to call it. But I heard a lot of stories just like that one today, where French people would go up and thank an American just for being an American because of, stuff like this, because we've done it. And by the same philosophy, Americans can thank the French.
Right.
Because the French came to our aid.
Yep.
So,
we wouldn't have had that surrender at Yorktown if it weren't for the French Navy and their presence, and because we just did not really have much of a navy at that time. And I don't know if the French supplied us directly with those Charleville muskets, but I know that America used that style of French musket into the 19th century. We were making our own copies of it at that point. But if anybody thinks historically, they think of the Statue of Liberty, and that's not really about it. It's almost like they invested in our country in the, what would that be, the 18th century, and then we repaid it in the 20th.
Yeah.
Let's not forget also, not only they supplied us with things during the Revolution, they also used the Navy to blockade the English from getting resupplied as well.
Oh yeah. The French. I'm perfectly willing to say it. The French helped out, colonial America incredibly.
But that wasn't the same French government that took control, 30 years later. That's not the same French government today per se, but still, the lineage is there, and I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, well, you could say the same thing. We're not the same government that went over to Normandy. We kind of are, but we're kind of not as well. And even that, the United States at that time was going pretty isolationist. And the Japanese made a big mistake on that. I'm sure we would have gotten into it at some point, but after the First World War, the United States went pretty isolationist. And we got into World War II late because we just didn't want to be in another war like that.
There's a lot to be said about D-Day changing, obviously, the face of the world forever.
Oh, hell yes.
D-Day put America in the forefront as a superpower. We proved to the world that our military could invade foreign land competently. That now put our military as a fear before it really wasn't.
Oh yeah, and it's just we're on the the third picture here, and it's, I mean, they're recovering the dead. Those are dead bodies on that. You can see the boats out in the ocean as they're coming up, and I mean, this guy that we're looking at is, I mean, I'd probably put him. Well, I'm going by what 30-year-olds look like now, but I mean, this guy's, he may be 30, he may be 20, he may be 18 there. And
that body that he's sitting there gathering up may be a total stranger who he's never met. It may be the guy he rode into on the boat with. It may be the guy he went through basic with. It may be the guy he grew up and went to school with his entire life. It could be one of his friends or relatives. It's hard to tell.
Yeah. You have no idea who he's there with, but he's, and I mean, they're still in the middle of hell, and they're trying to take care of what's there. Take care of their guys.
Yeah, that's kind of what the story I've got is about.
Oh, that's definitely the story I've got, and like I said, mine isn't from Normandy, but mine is almost, I'd say, a little worse because of when it is, and there's twofold to why that is and what it is, but we'll cover that when we get there.
The interesting thing about D-Day is the casualty rate was like 134% casualty rate.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because
how could it be over 100? Well, casualties is also considered injuries. So these people would get shot, they'd bring them back, they'd heal, they'd bandage them up, send them out again, they get shot again. And so the casualty rate was like 134% during the invasion.
Oh yeah, I was reading a story about a guy, and it turns out he's here in North Carolina, but he was a medic. He got shot in the arm coming off the boat, and he kept going and pulling guys and patching them up, and then he got hit in the leg, and he put a tourniquet on it and shot himself full of morphine and kept working. And then he was dragging guys out of the water, and he actually got run over by one of the boats and got pinned to the floor. And the boat had to pull back some, and he got free again. And he got free from that and kept pulling guys out of the water. I mean, there's a guy that took 3 shots on there and kept going. Here you got just a mass of stuff, and this actually looks like it might be following the landing. So this is I'm assuming they've prevailed, and now they're bringing in everything to start marching.
Yeah, that's where they form the beachhead. Once you've got that, then you can bring in your logistics.
I want to say, and I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that the Omaha and Utah Beach, the Normandy invasion, D-Day is what I call it, is still the largest invasion in the history of the world as far as manpower, ships, planes, all of it together. I think it is still considered the largest single invasion in the history of the world.
I've seen the largest, and I've seen among the largest, so I'm not sure myself.
Yeah.
And I wish I could. Somebody had an infographic, and I forget where I saw it, but it had a list of all the troop carriers, all the battleships, all the people, all the paratroopers that went in. going in there, and I wish I'd remember where I saw that and pull it up. And here's colorized version, but these guys looks like they're quite a bit out still, but going in.
You know, there's a part of D-Day that I think that the vast majority of people might be don't know that affects most of our lives on a daily basis. For the majority of the people that watch the Daily Gun Show, that don't know if they understand the significance of the words "John has a long mustache." And "John has a long mustache" was a code word that was sent through the German-occupied France to let the resistance know that there were two phrases. "John has a long mustache" was to let the French resistance know that the attack is on. And the second part of it is "wound my heart with monotonous longer." That told them that it's going to happen in the next 24 hours. So these little radio messages that were being sent to the resistance, you know, we joke about it all the time. Oh, the chair's against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache plays a significant role because that let the French resistance, who did help, know that we were coming, and that was significant. I don't know if a lot of people knew that.
I did not know that. I had no idea.
And I've been wanting to ask G what that means for the longest time, but I didn't want to aggravate him.
The bit he plays is from
The Longest Day.
No.
Well, the bit he plays is from Red Dawn.
Yeah,
The Longest Day. The Longest Day is a great movie. As a matter of fact, it's on right now. If you got anybody who wants to watch it, it's on, I think, Turner Classic Movies.
Yeah.
But the Longest Day did go through that. But like I said, that was directly from the Allied code. Was "John has a long mustache" was letting the French resistance know that it's on, and "wound my heart with monotonous longer" told them it was going to happen in the next 24 hours. So that notified the French resistance in German-occupied France that we. And I think that's just, you know, something as simple as "John has a long mustache." We hear it every night on Daily Gun Show, but the vast majority of people have no idea. That was significant in the changing of the world, you know.
See, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. And you know, here we've got guys that are patched up, and look at, I mean, this guy, his whole face is covered. It looks like he's got maybe a little slit for his eyes, and his mouth is open. And these guys are going to go back. You know, most of these guys are going to go right back into the fight.
Now, what was that movie? Came out obviously after the war, but I believe it was for a soldier that was severely damaged in his face and all that, and had his whole head was wrapped up. And Metallica used it in one of their videos a long time ago.
Johnny Got His Gun.
Johnny Got His Gun.
And that's off of a book, right?
Was that about D-Day?
No, that was World War One. That was World War One.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
And there's somebody who didn't make it home. Pulling guys from the water. And I'm just kind of flipping through these, and you know,
You think about laying on that beach. Once you've hit the beach and you've dug a little bit of a foxhole, I guess, to lay in for a couple minutes to get your wits about you. That's not remotely even safe.
No,
because it's not like the bad guys are sitting there aiming. They're just pulling the trigger downrange. Yeah. So any random bullet could hit you at any random time.
Yeah, they were up on the top of the cliff, so they're just spraying down.
I joined late. I don't know. I'm sure you guys already did, but have y'all already talked about the first part of Saving Private Ryan?
Just briefly.
Now, obviously, none of us were there, but I've heard from documentation that said that there were a lot of people that were still alive when that movie kind of came out that were there, and they said that that was as close to it, the craziness as they could make it in a movie.
That's what I've heard too.
My great uncle was there, and he told me that is the most accurate depiction I've ever seen of what it was really like. And to hear that from somebody who was there that I know, that I trust, and this isn't one of those guys that tells the tall tales. I mean, he doesn't even talk about the war a lot, not because he can't handle it, but he just doesn't talk about the war a lot. He talks more about what he did after the war and stuff like that. Regular kind of guy. He's passed away now. But it was good for me to hear stories like that, because I want to be able to hand that down to my kids and my grandkids. And look at this. Now it can be out there on YouTube that, a veteran said this. You guys are verifying this as well with things you've heard. And this stuff is being preserved for the generations that are to come, that are going to forget all about this and not realize the significance.
There are, and I'm probably going to get some grief on this because it's a historically inaccurate movie. But watching The Patriot with Mel Gibson, and I know it's horribly historically inaccurate, but if you can watch that movie and watch Saving Private Ryan and not come away with a sense of pride of what men in our country have done, then I don't know what's wrong with you.
Well, I'm just wondering if, nowadays people have just become too desensitized to it, or if they, just the way things have been twisted in our country. I got in an argument with somebody who didn't think that things like this were noble at all. I kind of wanted to say, well, then get out of our country. Renounce your citizenship.
There's some that aren't. But to say that about World War II, you're absolutely wrong. They were fighting actual evil. It's not, Orange Man bad evil. This was
right. But the soldiers, sailor, marine, airman, they don't pick the war. No. That's the government. So to blame the servicemen for the governments, not always.
No, never. You did. I'm not gonna blame the I'm gonna blame the serviceman who does, unthinkable things that are completely under his control. But to blame the serviceman for going to Vietnam or going to Korea or going into Iraq or whatever, no, that's not it. But when there are certain wars where you absolutely have the moral authority to say we did the right thing, and this is one of them.
I think a lot of it comes down to people that, most everybody in this room are relatively within a window close to the same age. But I think the problem that the next generation, my daughter's 22, her generation and younger, the problem that we're going to have going forward is these standardized tests. They teach tests to answer A, B, C, or D, but very few times do they ever go into depth about history anymore, whether it's World War II, the Constitution, American Revolution. They might spend a day or two on these wars. So these kids are not being taught about what our country went through, where our country was before these wars, where we were after, is what's happened, 50, 75 years later. I don't think they're being taught the significance of war. They're being told from the liberal media and honestly liberal institutions of higher education that war is ugly, war is bad, we should not be in war. And to a certain extent, I think we would all love to see that, but war is inevitable. To become a country that will not be messed with, you have to prove that you shouldn't be messed with, and that's what war is.
It gets me upset, really upset, as an American and as a veteran, when I hear a young person who hasn't gone through very much life yet judge America's past by today's standards, by today's technology, by today's education, by today's economy, by today's everything. Like, there was nothing before this person was born or before this person, came of voting age or whatever. It's like, do you not realize how many hundreds of years we were a colony before we were a country? So many people have come before you. How dare you judge the past with ignorance? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everybody, you can't judge the past by today's standards, because today's standards, and that could go back to the same thing. If you're in 1944 about to embark on this, you can't judge what your ancestors did at the 100 years previous to that, because it's
Yeah, like, let's not go over there and help England not get invaded by Germany because we broke away from England. You let go and you go, it's been a long time, we're allies now. The funny thing is, if you even want to call it funny or ironic, is that England in the 1930s, their military strategy was developing war plans to fight a war with America. Not because they were going to invade us or whatnot, because at that point they were thinking we were the biggest threat on the horizon. We do war games. All countries do war games, and sometimes it's with fictitious countries, and sometimes it's not. But it's to prepare for the eventuality of war. And when the enemy changes, it's kind of difficult. When we were trying to take Cold War technology and Cold War tactics and put them into fighting terrorism, that took some transitioning and stuff. But the simple fact is, your enemy today could be your friend tomorrow, and vice versa. And the people that don't want to let go. I was in the barber shop a month or two ago, and there was a 95-year-old gentleman in there saying, I don't know if I can forgive those, if I can use the racial slur on the show, Japs. Okay? He still called them that, right? Mm-hmm. And back in that day, and for the people who don't judge, or people that judge the past by today's standard, back in that day, that was pretty standard. Okay? Today it's a racial slur, but back in those, and he was like, he said, yeah, I just don't think I can ever forgive him or whatnot. And he goes, I know a lot of people have, and maybe I should, but I just don't know that I can. And it's like, wow, he's held on to this long. 70 years he's held on to this. And that's the very first time I think I've heard a veteran that maybe wasn't in some old newsreel or some old documentary say something like that. A lot of them have learned to let go. And the people on the other side too. The pilot who bombed Oregon, the Japanese pilot who bombed Oregon, came to the town nearest to where he dropped the bombs, and he apologized, and he gave the town his family's samurai sword. It sits in the town museum, and he started a program where he started accepting foreign exchange students from America into his home over in Japan. It goes both ways. And I think that sometimes the healing process after war is a difficult thing, and some people may never heal.
Oh yeah.
But it's how our whole planet, our whole world evolves, right?
Oh yeah. It's there's gonna be some scabs, and some of them are gonna get picked, and they're gonna bleed for a lot longer, and they're never gonna heal. But yeah, that's the whole thing. You've got to switch it off at some point and move on, or you're
to look at
it doesn't eat at the people you hate, because they have no idea you hate them.
When you see some of the World War II veterans get together from both sides, and they shake hands and they hug and they go, we were just soldiers doing our job. There's no more hate. There's no more. That is an ultimate, I don't know, characteristic of humanity that shows what we're able to accomplish, what we're able to move past. Even the stories that happened during the war, like that German fighter pilot that helped the damaged American fighter plane get back to safety and then turned around and went back to Germany. He could have shot him down. And just like what you were saying, have the wherewithal to go, this isn't going to help anything on my side. It isn't going to do, I'm just going to do the right thing, and so be it. I mean, things like that do happen during war. Unfortunately, though, sometimes when America is compassionate, the enemy takes advantage of it. War's just not pretty no matter what.
No.
I remember when it came time to tell my grandmother that I'm getting married. My grandmother was a nurse at Pearl Harbor in December 1941. My uncle was born in Hawaii. For me to tell her that I was marrying a girl from Japan, I was extremely nervous about. Now, the funny thing is, you know, my wife and her hit it off immediately, and they became very, very close. And my grandmother thought very highly of my wife. But at our wedding, obviously, my wife's family came over from Japan for the wedding, and one of the best pictures taken was all of the grandmothers on both sides, because she was in a picture with Japanese women that were her age that she didn't know if their husbands fought in the war. She didn't have a clue, but the fact that she was able to differentiate between war and life was nice, because I was not going to lie, I was very nervous about telling her because I did not think that she would approve.
Oh yeah, because she.
And at first she didn't. Like I said, they grew into very, very close friends.
Well, yeah, because she, like you said, she was there.
Yeah, and it's not like we sat there and said, you know, Granny, you shouldn't think that way. I mean, there was no way to say that because she was literally there, you know, and
yeah.
It was one of those things where, like, well, she's either going to love you or she's going to hate you, but we can't change her mind one way or the other, you know.
Yep, we're hoping for the
best.
We're hoping for the former, but it may be the latter, and we'll just have to get by. Christmases and Thanksgiving may be a little rough.
Yeah, I think that she told my dad at one point, she's like, he cannot marry a Japanese girl. And I think my dad made a comment to her, says, well, then I guess we're not inviting you or something like that. And things changed pretty quickly at that point.
There's guys using a Nazi flag as a tablecloth. I'll probably get some kind of community guideline strike for showing a historical photo.
Well, that has a lot to do with my story when we get to them. The flag.
Okay. All right. A bunch of guys in landing craft, and they're wearing life vests. I'm assuming that's what the white thing that they're. Those are life vests.
That was a flotation device. Let's think about this. Let's just think about this.
Pieces of rubber that are melted together and pumped full of air. Is that probably? That's probably
the
all that
cheapest bidder. Yeah, by the cheapest bidder. Sure. Let's think about this, though. We're talking 1944, and a lot of these people were literally 17, 18-year-old kids from the farm, right?
Yeah.
Think about this. How many of these people honestly didn't know how to swim?
Oh, yeah.
They had probably never left the county, let alone left the country.
Exactly.
Yeah, they probably never left their county. Some of these people, had probably only seen water when they had their monthly bath. Because it wasn't like.
People don't understand we didn't have telephones everywhere in the interstates, and not everybody had a car, and things were different back then.
Yeah, it was. I mean, them going just to sign up and go to boot camp was the trek of their lives, and then they get shipped overseas.
Yeah, and
They
most
all
people,
they all board a steam train at the depot to go to wherever their boot camp is.
and then they took a boat. It probably took them a week to get overseas to Britain, you know.
Mhm.
And a lot of these guys that were on these ships that were sailing and moving to Normandy, when they saw the planes flying overhead, was probably the first time they'd ever seen an airplane. And some of them were then a part of the new airborne division. Not only did they probably never know what an airplane was a month ahead of time, now they're being asked to jump out of it. That's just crazy to think about that.
And I sit in my backyard and I see the planes going up, and I'm going across the sky like, get out of my sight. I didn't move out here to the country to watch planes fly across my sky. You're in my sky. You know, and these guys had never seen one.
And they're being asked to jump out of them. That's just, it's mind numbing to me to think that.
Yeah, not only are we going to take you up in this thing and, you know, you're at thousands of feet above the ground, but now you got to get out.
Don't mind all the guys shooting at you on the way down.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, you're going to be at least 5 miles off of where you're supposed to be landing, and you don't know where your friends are.
Yeah.
And if you want to know where your friends are in the dark, you've got to use this toy, this child's toy, as a signal.
No
Anything
clicker.
else,
Yeah.
shoot it. 1 click for yes, 2 clicks for no, or something.
I think it was, you ask if it's a
Was it-
friend by 1 click, and you reply with 2 clicks.
Yeah, that's what it was. So,
Yeah, if
and people don't know about that.
If there was a click, it was a friend. If there was no click, it was an enemy.
That's correct. And it had to be 2 clicks. It had to be 2 clicks. If it was 1 click in response, it was don't trust it, you know?
Oh, okay. We got some German soldiers surrendering. And here we got American paratroopers about to jump out of the first plane that they've ever been in. Well, they'd be paratroopers, so it wasn't the first plane that they've ever been in, but it's, you know, heading out to war. I bet it's probably
They hadn't been to many, I promise you. They probably didn't take more than 1 or 2 test jumps, I promise that.
I'll bet they've been in less than a dozen planes.
When they strapped on their gear, it weighed them down so much they had to have help getting into the planes. They couldn't climb up the short ladder to get into the plane because they were weighed down with so much stuff. They needed to carry all that gear on their bodies because once they get down to the ground, that's it. What they have is what they have. If they were in a glider, they had more supplies on them. But otherwise, what you had is what you... And there were lots of guys that lost equipment on the way down.
Midnight says his grandpa wouldn't get on a plane. He took a boat. He got in trouble because he told an officer he'd have to fucking shoot him to get on the plane.
Well,
yeah, my wife's grandpa would not get on a plane at all. And then at the end of the war, they said, if you get on this plane right now, you go home. He said, write me up my orders. I'm getting on that plane. So amazing what it does to change your attitude about those things.
British soldiers.
the first time I ever jumped, my very first jump, I'm terrified of heights, first of all, okay? Actually, I don't know if I'm terrified of heights. I'm terrified of hitting the ground really hard. I don't know. But I didn't want to jump out of the helicopter. And this is the jump master was a staff sergeant, and he looked at me. And I'm a private PFC maybe, and he said, "Miller, scared, aren't you?" I was like, "Yes, I am." He goes, "I tell you what, I'll give you 2 choices." I was like, "Oh, sweet, you know, I'm getting out of this." He said, "You can either jump out or I want to throw your ass out." So it made it a real quick decision. I think I better jump because at least I have a parachute if I jump. If he throws me, I haven't hooked up to the cable yet. So
he might.
I think I'll do it myself. Yeah.
I'm picturing that siege in Heartbreak Ridge where the Swede is looking at him and he goes, "Gunny, I'm scared." And he goes, "There's nothing natural about jumping out of a perfectly good aircraft."
That's true. It is very true. And it is an interesting feeling.
Here's British soldiers sharing some rum they found floating. So,
can you imagine what they found floating or washing up on the beach? I can't even imagine like
Everything
pictures or watches or
everything
whatever.
that didn't make it. Everything
Yeah.
that didn't make it. That's but here you got guys that have landed. They've survived and they're making the best of it.
I would.
And they know they're going to have to go back.
Can you imagine how drunk I would have gotten, or they would have gotten? They
Oh, I'm sure.
I'm
sure
there wasn't enough whiskey or cigarettes at the end of that invasion.
Or captured Germans.
Is that I'm on my phone.
Eisenhower.
I can't. Yeah, I was gonna say it looks.
Yeah,
like
that's Ike.
To see.
Yep. Eisenhower gives order of the day: full victory, nothing less, to paratroopers in England just before they board their planes to take part in the Normandy invasion.
And I don't know the historical validity of this because you could read 10 different books and you're going to probably get 10 different accounts. But the vast majority of things that I've read about it was Eisenhower was completely convinced that they should wait another month into July because of the weather. He really, really, really did not want to do it on June 6th because it was bad weather. And I don't know if that's true or not, but that's really interesting.
I read that today. He had like 3 or 4 meteorologists that he consulted with, and they told him June 4th or June 5th, 6th, or 7th, or they would have to wait till the end of the month. And it was really, really shitty on the 5th. The 6th was kind of okay. So they made the call to go.
Ironically, in today's war kind of prep, the crappier the weather, the better, because no one's expecting it. But back then, without the communications that we had, they had to have somewhat clear skies and no fog because the ships and everyone had to communicate together. That is not the case today. So everyone does it at night or in crappy weather. But back then, they did have to almost wait, most certainly, for decent weather just for the communication side, which is really interesting. We talk about differences between then and now,
Yeah, and it still wasn't ideal, but then I saw that at the end of the month when they would have gone, it was really bad. So it was good that they went when they did.
It may have never happened, honestly.
Yeah. British soldiers carrying, and they've got to be. They got the berets on, so those guys have got to be. Would those be some kind of special forces if they got the guys that are at the front here? They don't have the.
I don't think they wore the berets, but I think it's probably maybe French or something.
It says British.
That left in one of the British forces or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think that anyone in the U.S. started wearing berets that early, so it's probably had to be someone that was in the British Army. Who knows, though? I mean, it very well could be. I don't know. Yeah. I'm not telling you no. I don't know.
They got French townspeople waving at the Allied forces coming in.
Imagine being in the same pair of wet, sandy, dirty, bloody clothes.
Everything.
Until when do you get to change? Who knows? You'll find out.
Never.
For some of them, it was a month. Maybe,
Yeah, you got to wash it and put it back on. And British paratroopers.
Or you just didn't wash it. You just ran with it,
Yeah. British Royal Engineers share cocoa with a French boy. Look at him. He's got on a 3-piece suit? Canadian soldiers disembarking. That was it for that. But there was 5 great movies inspired. Longest Day, Overlord.
Phenomenal movie.
I have not seen either of these. I don't think I've seen.
You really do need to see The Longest Day if you really want to. It's really a good movie. It's John Wayne's in there. I mean, it's really a good movie.
The Big Red One, Saving Private Ryan, and that does it. Talks about the first 30 minutes.
Can you imagine? And I've never seen, and I'm sure you could probably find it somewhere on YouTube or somewhere online, the actors and the extras or something that, were in that. Can you imagine the absolute stress and craziness it took to film that? Because if it was a 30-minute scene, it had to take months to, or a month to film it all, But can you imagine the mindset of having to be put in that scene for that long? That's just nuts to me.
Yeah, you just day after day after day, you're going, you're doing the.
Well, I
the
mean,
same
the
thing.
Big Red One, Lee Marvin, he's a World War II veteran. Supposedly, the scene in the beginning of the movie where he's portraying a World War I veteran, he was actually acting out something similar that happened to him in World War II.
These are all definitely ones I'm going to have to. Storming Juno in 2010. I haven't seen that either. I've seen Saving Private Ryan out of these 5. So I've got 4 movies to watch. It looks like. Yeah. Number 13 memorable. D-Day occurred June 6th, 1944. And you know what the D stands for in D-Day? Anybody?
I'm sorry?
Does anybody know what the D stands for in D-Day?
I don't actually. I thought it was 0 hour D-Day.
Wasn't it just like a random thing that they gave it? Like, doesn't the D actually not really mean anything?
The D stands for day.
Yeah, I'm saying it's 0 hour D.
So it's actually day
per day. Yeah.
Because D was the way they designated the day of the invasion. So it would have been anything leading up to it would have been D-1 or.
That's correct. D-1.
D-1, and then it would be
correct. Yeah.
D+1 after. So the D in D-Day stands for day. Normandy was chosen because the Allies were hoping to surprise German forces, and here's where we had talked a little bit, I think, before you got in, Ghost, where Pas de Calais is where they were trying to convince Hitler that they were coming in.
Yeah, because the Germans were convinced that the Americans would never come from the large, they were going to come from the smaller channel, what would take them right there. They never thought that they would come from the larger channel to Normandy. They all assumed that they were going to, that's why they had everything set up to kind of like filter them through the smaller channel. It's really, I mean, from what I don't know, but I'm just gathering all the stuff that I've read over history. I'm a big World War II guy, so it is very interesting that there was a couple people that kept telling the Nazi hierarchy that, you can't think of how we would do it. You got to think outside the box. And they were basically told to shut up.
And D-Day action centered around the 5 beaches.
That is something that I've never been over there, but that's definitely a bucket list. I would love to get to Omaha and Utah Beach and just stand there. I mean, that would be amazing. That's going to be a bucket list thing,
Mm-hmm. 50 miles of coastline real estate altogether. Omaha was the worst, roughly 2,400 American casualties plus 1,200 German casualties.
The sad thing is the vast majority of those never touch sand.
Mm-hmm. In 1943, the Allies kicked off an ingenious misinformation campaign using everything from phony radio transmissions to inflatable tanks. They successfully convinced the Germans that the British and American forces planned to make landfall at Pas de Calais.
Also, imagine if there was no Russian front at the time either.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, people tend to forget that the Russians were allies back then,
Yeah. D-Day was planned with the help of meteorologists, and that's where I thought that 3 different teams of meteorologists who predicted that in early June the weather would be best on the 5th, 6th, or 7th. Eisenhower wanted to start on the 5th.
I remember reading something somewhere that they had picked the 6th because of what the meteorologist was saying, but on the 5th it was so bad. Like they literally went down to like the last minute to really decide if they were going to do that, because the weather on the 5th was so bad they didn't think it was going to break even enough to do it. So I think they waited like to the last minute to decide to do it or not.
Yep. And then they postponed it for 24 hours. And that's when they began. And they were worried that if they waited for a better day, the Germans might have better time to prepare. And there was a massive storm at the end of June. Here's where they tell you that D-Day, the D stands for day. Here we go. D-Day was among the largest amphibious assaults in military history. Approximately 156,000 Allied troops, United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Belgium, Czechoslovakia, France, Greece, New Zealand, Norway, and Poland landed on the beach of Normandy. They were accompanied by almost 7,000 nautical vessels, 10,000 individual aircrafts.
Think about 7,000 ships at one time. Imagine that. It's an amazing number to think about.
Well,
7,000 ships.
Try to put it in this perspective for maybe something that your average everyday John Q. public could understand. Everybody's been to the airport. Everybody's seen a passenger jet that you fly across the country in. Imagine 7,000 of those sitting on the tarmac, and that's not even remotely close to how big it was. But everybody knows how big an airplane is. Not many people probably realize how big a destroyer is or an aircraft carrier.
They deployed floating tanks.
That didn't work out so well.
No, that's what I saw on this.
No,
the one at Omaha mostly sank. Adolf Hitler was asleep. Did you cover that, Kingpin, when we started up? Or was it Squib?
Yeah, we were both talking about it.
He'd had a big party. Got a little tipsy and decided to sleep in a little bit.
There is a scene, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say it's in The Longest Day, that when they were doing John Has a Long Mustache and Wound My Heart with Monotonous Longer and all that, there were Germans that had kind of picked up on it and warned the hierarchy of the Nazi party and said, it's coming, they're coming now. Mm-hmm. And they literally said, there's no way they're going to come. The weather's too bad. You must have misunderstood. I mean, there were Germans that said, hey, this is happening. We got to prepare. And there were people in the hierarchy of the Nazi that said, there's no way. There's no way they would attack in this kind of weather.
Eisenhower was fully prepared to accept blame. I saw this earlier today that he'd written a letter that he was.
Let's think about this. Would Eisenhower become president had a D-Day not been successful? Hell no, he wouldn't.
Hell no.
No, he failed at Market Garden. Market Garden was one of the biggest failures ever. They were supposed to be home by Christmas.
Yeah.
What is
but had he had failed at D-Day, he is not a national hero.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Could you briefly say what is it? Would you say roll call? Market Garden? What is that? Could you talk about?
Market Garden was the plan before D-Day that was supposed to end the war completely. And when they tried it, there's all kinds of different things they tried, but it failed miserably. It was a horrible failure. today's standards, it'd be a black eye. And it was supposed to end it by Christmas, but it didn't work. The weather didn't work
Yeah,
out.
that was I think that was in like the Netherlands, was it not? Like maybe
Yeah.
in October or something like that.
Yeah, that's why
Something
they
like that.
chose to do it again, and that's what D-Day was. From what I gather and what I researched from, and plus my grandfather, I'll tell you a story if that's all right about my grandfather. But
Well, we're gonna get to the stories.
all right.
So if you can hold on to your, you can just put that behind the door for right now because I know you know where the door's at.
Yeah. I do.
And then then when we're
show
ready,
you.
we can come back out. So we'll finish out here and then we'll start going through everybody's stories.
Right on.
But
I thought Market Garden after D-Day, but I might have been mistaken.
Theodore Roosevelt's son earned a Medal of Honor for
Yeah, I
fighting
thought it was after D-Day also. It was the invasion of Holland.
Was it?
56-year-old Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt
I
Jr.
think
led
it
the
was. I
first
think
wave of troops on Utah Beach.
If you're talking about when they tried to invade France before, they sent the Canadians to land on the beaches at Dieppe, and it was a dismal failure.
Yeah. It might have been like that. It was one of those
Yeah.
times, but Market Garden was the big one. They even made a fake movie about it. It was supposed to
Yeah, I want
end
to say that Market Garden, they tried to capitalize on D-Day, and it was later on in 44. If I'm not, I might be wrong. I think Market Garden was Holland, the Netherlands, whatever you want to call it. I think it was like in September or October of 44, and that was supposed to end the war, but you're right, it didn't, and it well past Christmas and all that. But I think that was after
Market Garden
D-Day. I
was
might be wrong about that though.
was in September 44. Was
There you
Market
go.
Garden.
Okay, yeah.
Like always, I'm late. I must have been looking at the clock.
Oh
in the
no!
hotel room.
I'm just saying, but you're right. It was a terrible failure, and it was supposed to end the war, and it did not, obviously.
And then altogether, the Allies took about 200,000 casualties over the course of the campaign, including 4,413 deaths on D-Day alone. And a little less than a year later, May 7th, 1945, Germany surrendered.
Surrender. Yep.
So let's go through here. Squib, you had a story to share. You want to go ahead and share it with us?
Can you come back to me in about 20 minutes when I clock out?
Sure.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Not a problem. Roll call. Go over to that door, get your story, and let's hear it, buddy. That door must be a little ways away. Roll call. All right. We'll come back to roll call 2.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I'm looking for my muck boots. I can't find my muck boots, man.
Well, now go over to the door.
All right.
Get your story, and let's hear it.
All right. So, my grandfather, God bless his no, he's Bud Dukowski. He was adopted. I don't know where he came from. Well, that's just the way it was back in, the 30s. And he used to work in New York for a family, I would say that way. And he signed up. He cheated just like everybody else. I mean, there's a lot of people that cheated back in World War II. He was 16 and a half. And he joined the army, and that's all he did. I think he had 3 weeks of basic at that point, and he shipped out. His first tour of active duty was Africa, and he fought against Rommel. If you guys don't know, that was a desert fox. He never liked foxes, and I never knew why when I was young. I didn't know my grandpa a whole lot. He died before, what you see today, which is not much. But he fought in Africa. They got whipped. That was the first time they suffered defeat for his unit. They came back. They beat Rommel back to the coast, and if you know the story, he took off, and then he got on a boat and he went to Italy. He came at they call it he called it the perspire of that damn boot, and that's what he called it, damn boot. Because if you look on a map, Italy looks like a boot. He went up through there, went to a small village. They fought over the village, I think he said for 3 days, until the Germans retreated. He found my grandmother and her family. He hurdled them up, pushed them back to the front line. Hopefully he doesn't get in trouble. Well, he's gone anyway, but he paid, I don't know how much he paid for somebody to ship my grandmother back to the States. And that's how this thing started. And he fought on. He went through Italy. He pushed up, got into Germany. I don't know, whenever he did. He didn't talk about a whole lot. I don't know if you guys, how well you knew your grandparents. He didn't talk a whole lot about it. But when we fished, because he lived in Maryland for a brief time, then he lived in Delaware. When we sat on the river, he talked about it. I'm sorry to throw that in there, but after he rescued my grandmother, he said he'd be back. Wait for him. Gave her the address, and he fought on all the way to Germany. And he got caught up in the Battle of the Bulge, like they always do. He fought through that, and then he was shot up above the collarbone. If you touch yourself right now, everybody do it. Touch yourself up above the collarbone.
Hey, it's not that kind of show.
Oh, sorry.
Want that? And tune in Sunday nights at 10:30ish for the closer.
There you go.
Whoosh.
He was shot there, and it ricocheted off his collarbone and came out the other way. Didn't know what he got shot with. He was actually, sorry, car going by. Oh, I was like, thank you for your service, cop. But it ricocheted out because he's picking up his buddy that was dead and tried to haul him back there, but he got shot, ricocheted out, came out the other side of his shoulder, and then drug his friend back halfway as much as he could, and then everybody else picked him up. His friend was deceased, and that was the guy that he hung out with through the boat through Africa into Italy as he got out of there. And then they tried to patch him up, but there was so much confusion and there was nothing that they could use to patch it up. There's not chest seals. Sorry, cars are going by. There's not chest seals or anything that back in 1942. So they packed it with dirt, and they stuck dirt in his shoulder. And that's how he lived for a couple days until they got him back there. He didn't die, but he said he's got to go back. And they were like, well, you'll be on the first transport. And he said, no, I got to go back to the front line because he can't leave his comrades. So they're like, there's nothing you can do. Your collarbone is shattered, came out your shoulder, you're done. So they stuck him up. They actually stuck him back up there, and he was shooting this thing. He compared it. What did he compare it to? Like a MG42, and that's what he did because that's the only thing he could do because he couldn't hold a rifle and point, but he could kind of move his fingers to press down on triggers. And that's what he did. And then finally they yanked him off there and they shipped him back. And that was the end of his end of the tour for that point. But he moved throughout the war with his unit. He never left. Why? I can't tell you. Maybe he did what he had to do. I don't know. I mean, that generation is called the greatest generation for something. I don't know. Maybe he had something invested in it. I don't know. You saw the fall of Germany, he left, and he said he's done. And they were like, all right, he's pretty much handicapped at that point. Came back, found my grandmother in New York, and now you see what you get from generations of that. So I'm far from it. I'm a third generation soldier, and from what I experienced, what he did, it's crumbs. And I'm proud to tell my grandfather's story. I'll put pictures on Instagram. He's got his folded flag. My dad's got his folded flag. My kids will get my folded flag. That's how it goes. It is what it is. But I'm proud. And hey, we're not speaking German, are we? So thank God. I love America. I'm always passionate. So is that dog. So, yeah. That's Bud Dukowski's story. And I'm sticking to it.
All right. Hell yeah. Thanks for sharing that, roll call. Kingpin, did you have one that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I don't have a personal story, but when you sent out the email earlier today, I did do a bunch of searching to try to find something that might be cool to talk about for really quick.
I didn't expect everybody to have a personal story, and what little reach I've got isn't going to be much, but anything that anybody here on the panel thinks is worth sharing, we got it out there. It is on the internet, and it can live in perpetuity or until they shut Google down. So
all right,
go ahead and share it.
Well, one of the coolest things that I found, and we can talk about why I chose this later, but I don't, it's not necessary to get into now. But Calvin Leon Graham was the youngest person to serve at D-Day. And according to what at least Wikipedia says, is he enlisted at 12 years old. Says following the attack on Pearl Harbor, he enlisted in the United States Navy from Houston, Texas on August 15th, 1942 at the age of 12. So I don't know whether that's true or whether it's not. I spent about a few hours looking into this kind of stuff. So if it's not true, then I totally mean no disrespect by that. If it is true, then that shows the kind of grit. And even if he didn't, join the military at 12, we've already talked about, all the people that did lie about their age and joined in because of what they were fighting for. And that I just thought that was something worth mentioning, that, there's so many young children. We would consider them children today. Talking about comparing old days to these days, we consider some of them children going off to fight for what we're doing right here, right now.
And even at 18, they're, I mean, I don't think anybody here is going to argue that, 18 years old is still, like Go said, most of us here of a certain age. You're probably the young one here. I don't know how old you are, but I think you're quite a bit younger than anybody else that's here on the panel.
I'm 42.
Are you 42?
Yeah, I just look devastatingly handsome and young.
Your hands that I've seen look extremely young.
Oil of Olay.
So we're all of a certain age here. Where everybody here is at least in their 40s, and some of us maybe a little bit older. Gizzard. But yeah, I don't think any one of us would look at an 18-year-old and not go, he's still a kid. I mean, but I interrupted, so carry on.
Oh no, that was it. I just wanted to share that story about the kid that joined at the age of 12, and if it's true, and if it's not true, I just wanted to mention all the people that did lie about their age and join as kids to go fight the bad guy. And then I'm going to be quiet and listen to everybody else's good stories.
That's crazy. If he really was 12, that is far above and beyond what you'd think. Even back then, when life expectancy wasn't nearly what it is today, that at 12 years old somebody thought of going over to fight for the country, for the world, not just for our country, but for the world. So thank you for bringing that one in. Gizzard, did you find the article you were looking for?
No, actually, I found something else.
Well, all right.
This is from a book that my sister gave me a year ago, which is basically a bunch of photos and memories from my father, who him and his brother were both pretty close to the same age and went overseas right about the same time. And this may go on a little bit, and it tends to jump from place to place, so I apologize. I didn't write this, so. My cousin Kenneth spent some time with Dad while he was in KU Medical Center when he was going through leukemia, because somebody always stayed with him. If one of us kids wasn't available, well, my cousin who lived up in Kansas City would oftentimes stay with Dad. A lot of things Dad wouldn't tell us kids about the war, but Kenny was able to get some information from him. Dad was aboard a Dutch ship to Europe. The trip lasted about 10 days, and they landed unannounced on June the 10th, 1944. So he was a little bit after D-Day. This was a large warship navigated by a Dutch crew. The Dutch commander was in fear they would be attacked as they landed because his English was so bad he was afraid they would mistake his announcements and approach as the enemy. Dad was assigned to a tank called Demon 1. His tank commander was an old man of 29 years of age. Dad would have been about 21 at the time, so. And they feared for their lives because of his advanced age, and in fact, he was not a bright or sharp-thinking individual. He was killed by a sniper walking to headquarters. Dad eventually became the tank commander. The actual invasion of Normandy happened while Dad was at sea. Because of all the war shell explosions, there was a lot of erosion around the trees and hedgerows, which made it impossible for the tanks to get through. They had to attach plows to the front of the tanks to enable them to get through these hedgerows. The American tanks were not constructed as good as the German tanks. The American tanks were designed to go fast, but the German tanks were heavier with metal, making them safer from being shot through. The Americans had to add metal mesh to stop the bullets from going through the side of their tanks. When entering villages, Dad reported they always first shot off or destroyed all the church steeples. This usually took about 3 charges. German snipers were usually posted in these high church steeples. They destroyed all these vantage points before entering a city. Dad reported the firearms assigned to men were mass-produced and of very poor quality. So all these World War II surplus guns may or may not have been any good.
All these M1 Garands that everybody's lusting over are mass-produced and poor quality.
Dad's initial tank, the Demon 1, had the track blown off by fire. He got a new tank. We are assuming a Sherman, but we don't know for sure. Infantrymen walked beside the tanks as they moved. Dad said they usually lost their infantry soldiers every 1 to 2 hours by either death or injury. Infantry was terrified of being in tanks because there was no escape and they were death traps, and tank soldiers were afraid of being in the infantry, no protection. A tank held 96 shells of different calibers. During three major battles, Dad's company lost all its infantry. Tanks often destroyed most all buildings in a town just because they were in the way of fire. Dad was lucky to survive again when his tank was shot. The shell entered at a low level near the swivel, then went out by the tracks. Dad remembers seeing the sparks as it hit. The men evacuated immediately and dove into a crater. Later during the war, they came back by and saw their old tank and was able to look at the damage. They were very lucky because usually you didn't survive attacks on a tank. American tanks never went through intersections or crossroads and avoided them at all costs. Germans set up 88s at every intersection to destroy tanks as they approached. Germans put out a lot of propaganda on how they were going to win the war, which enticed a lot of young men from Denmark and other countries to join. Dad said these men driving enemy tanks were 16, 17, 18 years old. It really bothered Dad to be killing these kids. The winter of 44-45 was one of the coldest winters in years. The tanks were cut off from the front line and had no supplies. They had to park their tanks and wait for relief. For protection, they parked them in a wheel or circular formation with guns pointing outwards. It was so cold the ground was frozen solid, which turned out to be an advantage because they could then hear an enemy approaching. If anyone touched the outside of a tank, they were shot immediately. After a week to 10 days, they finally got relief. However, they were so stiff and cold from being in the tanks all this time they could barely walk. Side note, infantry around them had to warm their frozen rifles by starting up a tank and using the exhaust fumes. Side note, in the late 30s, the airplane manufacturing plants in Pennsylvania gave sightseeing rifle rides and tours to area families. It was found out later that Hitler had planted many of those families as spies, and the pictures and films they took were sent over to Germany. Kind of a did you know type thing. Dad told me if they had time, they'd pull over and stop near a little French village to get some fresh field corn. They said it tasted so wonderful, but the local villages and farmers thought they were crazy because corn was grown as livestock feed, not fit for humans. Whoops, sorry about that. Hold on. Had an alarm set here. One last thing I wanted to say, if I can find it, and then I'll be done with this here. Towards the end of the war, against better judgment and taking the chance of being shot and killed by snipers, while waiting to come home, Dad and his brother stole an unoccupied Jeep, drove into Czechoslovakia, and went to Mass. Not everyone had received the word of armistice, but that was a testimony of their faith. So, kind of in a nutshell, a few odd stories of my dad and his brother, who met up several times while they were in Europe. And
Thanks for sharing that, Gizzard.
Would it be all right if I translated some of that stuff for anybody out in the audience who's not a history buff?
Sure.
Okay, so hedgerows were the foliage alongside the roads. The ground would be built up slightly higher than the road, and the trees would be really dense there. Think of it like a tree line at the edge of a farmer's field. It's really thick, and the enemy can hide in there, and they can set up machine guns and all this other stuff, and it would be crisscross all over the place. There was property lines and stuff like that with it, and the problem is the tanks couldn't get through it. So one of the guys figured out that if they took the hedgehogs from the beach, the hedgehogs were those big steel I-beam things that look like crosses, the X's, that they put up to stop tanks and landing craft from being able to land on the beach. And they took those, sorry about that. They took those steel hedgehogs and they torched them up, and they made these things that look like big forks. So they had prongs, 3, 4, 5, 6 prongs, however many they could fit on the front of the tank, and they welded it to the front of the tank. Now when the tank hit that tree line, that hedgerow, it just rip it right out and tear right through. So instead of having to go around the hedgerow or try to get through it on foot or something like that, your infantry can follow behind you and just storm in there and roust out any Germans that are hiding. People think that tanks are there to protect the infantry, but a lot of times infantry is there to protect the tank, believe it or not. And those tanks were armored and they were protected, but the German tanks had better armor and better guns than we did. So our shells would bounce off theirs, and theirs would cut right through ours. And you have to think about all those shells inside the tank going off and the fuel inside. Our tanks were powered by diesel and the German tanks were powered by gasoline. So German tanks would actually go up, catch fire a lot easier than ours. But once you get that diesel burning, your only option is to jump out of the tank. There were a lot of guys that were burned to death. And the 88 was an anti-tank gun. It was a cannon, 88 millimeter diameter shell. It was so powerful that not only did they use it as an anti-tank gun or mount it on some of their tanks to use against tanks, they used it to shoot down bombers, because if you pointed up at the sky, it could go a couple miles up. It was that powerful. And they called it the 88. It was a flak gun. Flak is short for Flacken something in German. There were a lot of things that we had to figure out on the fly, like how to get through those hedgerows, or just things that we weren't expecting when we got out there, that we just had to learn how to deal with. And it's that American ingenuity that really saved a lot of people's lives.
Oh yeah.
And another thing a real short thing I saw in there was they said it took 3 American tanks to destroy one of the German ones because they were so heavily armed. But basically, the American tanks could outmaneuver them because their turrets were electrically powered versus the Germans had to hand crank theirs around. So they'd basically surround it until one of them could get it from the back, because the back had relatively little protection on it, and they could take them out from the back. So,
one of the other designs that the German tanks had that the American tanks didn't was more of a sloped front, as opposed to the Americans had more of a flat face. It wasn't flat face, but it was flatter faced than most of the German tanks at the time. So, like Squib was saying, when we hit it with artillery, if it didn't hit it just right, it would deflect off. Plus the strength of the armor.
Yep, and that's all something that they had to learn as they were going. And we think about that, and we don't have the communications that we have today. That was stuff that got passed down person to person.
The guys that survived had to tell it to the guys coming up the line.
Yep, and they had to pass it around. It was, all that was passed. It might have been, some of it might have been passed by radio, but a lot of that was, passed down the line as you were going.
Well, imagine, like, I'm going to make light of it, but I don't mean to. You've seen the movie where the starting quarterback goes down and the coach looks into the stand and says, "Johnny, get down here. We need you." Well, imagine you're I don't know, I guess it's private first class, whatever the, initial ranking is that you get when you go into the military. And everybody that you call commander has been killed.
Mm-hmm.
So the guy who scored, better than you at boot camp is now your commanding officer.
They train us like that in the Marine Corps. Every Marine is trained to be a leader, even though you have officers and staff non-commissioned officers and non-commissioned officers above you. As people get killed, the next guy has to take over and take on that level of responsibility. So every Marine is trained as a leader, and it's supposed to be ongoing stuff. I can remember our officers teaching us stuff as non-rates, because not only in the hopes that one day we would move up in rank, but if something were to happen, they wanted us to know how to handle the responsibility of keeping our guys alive, because it's a reality of war. Yeah,
that's what most of it is. It's the higher ups have got the plans of taking this hill or taking this beach or whatever, but the guys down there in the trenches are keeping themselves and the guy next to them alive. But Ghost, I know you're probably gonna hop out here pretty quick to go over to Clover, so why don't you give us your story?
Well, it is not a D-Day story, but it is a Germany story. My grandfather was a tank commander under Patton in Germany. And I was 13 when he died. So, like I said, he never talked to me about anything. I think he probably would have had he'd lived long enough for me to join the Marines and do some of the stuff that I did. We would have something in common, but he never did talk about it. Drank very heavily, and my dad said he drank heavily his whole life as well, and a lot of it's probably because of what happened over there. Anyways, he died when I was 13, and when they had the will and all that, my father, my aunt, and uncle were all there, obviously, and my father got an envelope, and all it was a piece of paper with an address and a key. My dad, growing up in the town that my grandfather died at, recognized the address as a bank. So he went to the bank, and the manager of the bank said, "Mr. Miller, we're very sorry to hear about your dad. He was a customer of ours since the bank literally opened. It was built. And we know why you're here." And so he took him downstairs into this vault. And I guess back in the day when they were building this bank, they sold, not rented, but sold like vaults, and that help pay for some of the bank. And my grandfather had bought one back in the 40s, and had it for 40 some odd years. It was 1988 when he died. And so he opened it up, and inside was a mannequin with a full dress Nazi uniform with the Nazi armband they all wore, the red one,
Mm-hmm.
had blood all over it. He had picked it up. Not the uniform. The uniform he had gotten somewhere else, but the armband he had picked up in one of the battles, and it was blood all over it and all that. And I just remember my dad never let me see it, because what he did immediately was donate it to a museum. And because he wasn't even sure at that time the legalities of was that legal? Were we allowed to have that stuff or not? So he didn't want to get in trouble. So he donated it to a museum, but he took a bunch of pictures of it ahead of time. I remember seeing pictures of it, and it was just kind of one of those things that I can only imagine my dad, 40 years old or whatever he was, opening up this vault door, and it had been there since the 40s. And everyone in the bank kind of knew it was there, but no one had ever seen it because my grandfather never went there to open the vault up or anything. And opening it up and seeing a full Nazi uniform with blood on the armband I'm assuming that would have been pretty cool to see, honestly.
Yeah, that would have been something. So it must have been pretty decent sized safe deposit box if it had a full
it was a vault. It was an actual vault. Like I said, these things, this was one of those old style banks that everything was like underground and stuff. And like I said, from the story that I got is when they were building this bank, they were doing it for shelters and different stuff underneath for the town.
Okay.
And they were selling these vaults as kind of helping a way to fund the big building of this new bank. And my grandfather bought, not rented, but bought a vault at this bank. So he had it for all these years.
Wow. That's cool.
It was interesting. Like I said, I wish I was older, because even I was 13 years old when he died, and I didn't appreciate that. I didn't even the pictures that I saw, but I didn't appreciate. I didn't really understand what the semblance, the symbolic sight of a Nazi uniform was. I had no idea. My dad took pictures of the armband with blood on it. I was like, "Oh, that's kind of cool." But I'm 13 years old, so it's everything. Blood was Hollywood. I didn't understand what that meant.
Yeah, at 13, you still probably wouldn't have had any kind of idea of the significance of.
Oh, had no idea.
What was there? No, none whatsoever. So, but I'm glad he gave it to him. Glad he gave it to a museum so that
and honestly, God, it was so sad is you never think about this, but my dad is in bad shape now. But I'm gonna have to ask him tomorrow when I see him. I'm gonna have to ask him, does he remember what museum he donated it to? Because I would love one day to go see it. Now.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, now that now that you understand the significance of it, it's definitely something you want to go see, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'd say that was my grandfather's. You know, I would love to see that. That'd be awesome. I got to do that. I remind myself to do that tomorrow.
All right, cool. Thanks for sharing that, Ghost.
Oh,
Square.
Thanks for having me. This has been an awesome chat, by the way. Thanks for doing this, Obnoxious.
Hey, no problem. I was, I'm not gonna lie. It was, it was this afternoon, and I'm trying to come up with topics for this, and it just kind of dawned on me, and I thought, what better, I got lucky pulling today for having my show, so, I'm not gonna lie and say it was planned all along. It was, it was something I came up with, and I just thought it would be really cool to have, this kind of show today. So I'm glad that, I've learned some stuff about D-Day today because of having this show. So I guess it's, and I hope people out there in the audience have learned, and maybe guys on the panel have learned some stuff too. And, maybe we actually did something on the dumpster fire that is my show. So Squib, are you out and about where you can share your story now?
Yeah, I'm driving home. If you can deal with the noise of the truck, I'll pull over as soon as I can get a place here to pull over.
You're all right.
All right. So my great uncle was at Normandy. He joined the army. Him and his brothers, all of them that were old enough to serve, joined the military. My grandfather, his brother, joined the Navy, and my great uncle and I, I'd see him when I'd go down to our family's farm down in Kentucky, because each one of the sons had a portion of the farm. So I'd like to go over to his house and talk. And after the war, he used to make aircraft parts, and I was always into airplanes, and I worked on aircraft in the military and stuff. So we like to talk airplanes and stuff like that, and just there's always like Kingpin says, good conversation. Well, he was telling me a few different stories about serving over in Europe, and the Normandy story goes like this. They came across a guy who was still alive, but he wasn't going to make it. Something like he had a wound to his torso where all of his guts were all over the place. I remember in boot camp, they were telling us what to do when your buddy's guts are scattered all over the place. You pick them up and set them on top of his chest, and you stay with him until he dies. Really good, huh? Well, my great uncle was a medic, and he said, we knew the night before when we were on them ships that it was going to be bad. He said the reason we knew is because every night before something bad happened, before they were about to send us on a mission, on a something where they're expecting a lot of casualties and it's just going to be really ugly, they would give us ice cream and Coke. And he said, if you didn't understand, back then, it was hard to get a Coca-Cola or ice cream because everything was rationed during the war. And even though the military got first dibs on a lot of stuff, it's not like that stuff was just everywhere. So as a treat, they'd give you with dinner the night before ice cream and Coke. And after a while, they started to figure out ice cream and Coke was not a good thing. So he said that when they came across this guy, he was still alive. He was talking and everything, but there was nothing they could do for him. They more or less put him in the ambulance and took him somewhere just to, wait for him to die. And he was delirious. He was so out of it from the shell shock. I mean, he's laying there with his guts all over the beach, right? And he's just mumbling, ice cream and Coke, ice cream and Coke, ice cream and Coke. It's creepy, but that's the sort of thing that happens is, you get in this state of disbelief, you get in this fog, this confusion. He was more or less kind of like delirious. And maybe that was his body going into shock because he was going to die. There was nothing they could do for him. And he said he'll never forget that. He said the guy he just kept mumbling, ice cream and Coke, ice cream and Coke. And the parallel for me as a veteran was when we were deployed overseas. I was on board a ship, And we went to Somalia once, and we went to Bosnia, I think, like 2 or 3 times. And the night before we were going to go somewhere, we'd get steak and lobster. Now, this is government issue steak and lobster. Okay, so it's not the greatest steak, and it's plastic lobster. But still, steak and lobster is not on the menu in the galley every night. By about the second or third time we got steak or lobster, it occurred to me, oh crap, that means tomorrow something's going to happen. So nothing changed in the, what would that have been, 45 years from the time he was over to the time I was in, as far as them, you know, giving you a good meal to kind of boost your morale right before they send you somewhere to die. So it's always stuck with me, that story, because it might seem like a minor thing. Somebody today wouldn't think anything about having ice cream or enjoying a soft drink. But that was a treat for them. But it wasn't something you look forward to if you lived long enough to know what it meant.
Yeah, we got pizza and beer.
So
But understand that was very out of the ordinary, like Squib's saying. So yeah, you figure out, oh, what the hell, you know?
So Squib was in a better unit than you because he got steak and lobster. That's what
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, we only got beer when they took the beer out of the vault on the ship. So they actually flew a couple pallets of beer. I've got a picture of me on the flight deck with one of these pallets of beer. They flew it out to the ship on a helicopter, and we hauled it down the ladder well, through the passageway, into this big vault that was up in officer country right underneath the flight deck. And they stored it in there. And I was like, what's going on? What's going on? And then one day we threw what they call a steel beach. And that's where they stop operations and they grill on the flight deck, and everybody gets 2 beers. So you walk up there with your ID card. They take your name off the list. They scratch it off the list. They open up 2 beers in front of you, hand it to you, and that's all you get. I sold mine because I said 2 beers. What's that going to do? So I sold mine.
All right.
So, were crayons like an everyday part of the menu, or was that like another bad news treat?
No, you had to go down to the ship store to get crayons, but the ship store, like the post office and the barber shop, were always closed.
So you had to buy your own crayons?
You know, it's really weird when you're on Liberty in France and you're asking around for crayons. So I couldn't find any place that sold crayons, so I saw a Van Damme movie.
I'll tell you what we did is when crayons ran out, we just went and got like some scented candles, because it's basically what it is. It's scented wax.
See, I was in France. That's what I should have looked for, was scented. Oh my goodness, I didn't even think.
See?
Thanks for sharing that, Squib. Now I'm going to share my story, and if I realize I have a potato cam here because I have DSL, so you guys probably can't see too much of this, but I will tell you that this is a 74-year-old piece of paper that is here. And those of you that have been in the military, I'm sure you understand what I have here when I have a 74-year-old piece of paper. And there is one that is just over 70 years old.
Does it start out, "Dear Sir or Ma'am"?
It starts out, "Dear Mr. Germain."
That's
yeah.
not good.
So I'm going to. This is not a Normandy thing, but I will tell you that there are 2 things about the date on this letter. It is dated 11 March 1945. Now, as you know, that is just about 2 months before Germany surrendered. And 11 March 1945 is also my mother's birthday. Was my mother's birthday. Mr. Germain is my great-grandfather on my mom's side. So this was my grandmother's brother. Does that make him my great-uncle, I think? But it starts out to Mr. Aaron Germain, Pecatonica, Illinois. Tech 5, Irvin L. Germain. I'm guessing 363-142-276 was his service number. Medical Detachment, 5th Ranger Infantry Battalion. In the name of the officers and enlisted men of the 5th Ranger Infantry Battalion, please accept this expression of our deep sympathy at the loss of your son, Irvin. Corporal Germain was a fine soldier. He knew how to live and how to fight, though his was a mission of mercy, fighting death and the misery of his comrades, and because the cause in which he was engaged was so close to his heart, embracing the protection of those he loved, he also knew how to die. He died bravely, his face turned toward the enemy, awaiting the opportunity to succor his afflicted comrades, to ease their pain and comfort them. He died swiftly, painlessly, mercifully spared the long days and nights of suffering which so many have had to endure. Swift as was his passing, however, he was prepared, for he and his buddies had placed their spiritual equipment in order, and each man had, with the chaplain, dedicated the work at hand to the divine will which knows all and makes all things right. A chaplain of the Protestant faith officiated at his burial service, and Irvin rests now in a military cemetery in Luxembourg, and with him rest his final peace, all too many fine young men like himself. May their sacrifice and your sorrow hasten the day of victory, and make the peace long, lasting, and just. Since we of the Rangers knew, trained, and lived with your son, may we ask the privilege of sharing his memory, and may that memory be our inspiration to fight in war and peace for the principles for which he gave that life so precious to God, to you, and to his country. In deepest sympathy, Lieutenant Colonel Richard P. Sullivan, Commanding Officer, 5th Ranger Battalion. And that needs to go. I don't have any children. I have cousins that have children. I don't know how I ended up with all this stuff, but that is definitely needs to go to some of my cousins.
Thanks for sharing that, man. That's pretty incredible.
This is the letter, 12th of April, 1949, telling his father, my great-grandfather, where he is in Luxembourg. With the U.S. military, he is in Plot 1, or Plot I, Row 3, Grave 7. And this is a citation for his Silver Star, which I have. There is his Silver Star that he received.
I hope people in your family understand the significance of the Silver Star. That's incredible.
And his Purple Heart.
That's awesome.
The citation for his Silver Star, posthumous. Technician, 5th grade, Irvin L. Germain, again his service number, MD, Ranger Infantry Battalion, for gallantry in action in Germany between 2 March 1945 and 3 March 1945. Technician Germain, ambulance driver, was assigned the mission of evacuating patients from his battalion aid station to a clearing station near Serig. Transporting critically wounded men, he drove his vehicle fearlessly over roads subjected to heavy enemy artillery and machine gun fire. Twice when bullets riddled the tires and motor of his ambulance, Technician Germain, disdaining his personal safety, boldly exposed himself to make the necessary repairs and to reach his destination. On the following day, as he prepared to leave the aid station with a load of casualties, Technician Germain was killed by hostile shell fire. His conspicuous bravery, steadfast determination, and supreme devotion to duty were inspirational to all who served with him and brought the highest credit upon himself and the Army of the United States. Entered military service from Illinois, next of kin, Mr. Aaron Germain, father, Pecatonica, Illinois. And that is not my D-Day story, but it is my Germany story. Obviously, I never knew him. I don't honestly know, without really tracking it down, how old he was at the time. But imagine he was probably my grandmother's younger brother, though I could be wrong. As I said, my mom was the youngest of the three girls that my grandmother had, and she was born in 1945. My grandfather, my mom's father, because he wasn't really my grandfather. He died when my mom was about 6. Obviously, he didn't. I don't think he served in World War II at all. Obviously, he would have been the sole provider for, a family of a wife and 3 daughters. So I don't know if he would have. I doubt he served any. My grandfather that I knew was my grandmother's second husband. He was always my grandfather, and he was a Marine, and he did serve during World War II. I'm not sure he ever left stateside. He was a radio operator, and I had heard, whether it's true or not, that he was stationed. I know he was stationed in San Diego. But whether the story I heard was true or not, that he took the radio message of the Pearl Harbor attack coming stateside. That he was on the radio, and he actually had his, and I've never found them, but that he had his notes and his sheet from taking the call of the Pearl Harbor attack coming stateside. He was the first one to hear about it. So those are my Germany stories. And like I said, they're not D-Day. I think this one, I never knew him. I never knew him. But that's somebody who was 2 months away from coming home, and he never made it. So I think I'm gonna forego doing any plugs. I'm gonna forego having anybody do any plugs. So I'm sure you guys all understand that we had a little fun tonight. We had some somber stuff tonight, but we'll end the show with that if you take nothing else from the show tonight, remember that there were people out there who died so that we could have this show on YouTube and sit comfortably in our living rooms or our offices or our cars or wherever we may be watching or broadcasting from. So thank you, everybody that's out there in the chat. Thank you to you guys in the panel. And I guess that's it. Have a good night, everybody. Go over and watch Clover Tech. I will do that plug for him. He's usually got some good stuff on Thursday nights talking nerdy.